Great. Next up, we have Team SOMOS. Ian Culver, welcome to the stage. So you've waited all morning.
I did.
This is a long haul. So does that make it harder or easier to go last?
It was sort of nerve-wracking to sit there for 2 hours and think about all the details I'm going to go through, but...
Yeah. I'm sure it's my imagination that they've gotten harder as the morning's gone on, but they'll be great. They'll be good.
Thanks for the assurance.
So tell us a little bit about what you're going to present on.
Yeah, so SOMOS is a proposed farming cooperative that would essentially maximize all of the resources that's used in the coffee production process in order to minimize waste and gain an additional revenue stream.
Great. Well, good luck.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you all for being here today. My name is Ian Culver, and I'm delighted to present Team SOMOS. Through strong collaboration between the National Autonomous University of Nicaragua and Kendall College of Art and Design of Ferris State University, this project has emphasized careful resource management in rural parts of Nicaragua during a severe drought. Today I'm going to talk about our process and how we reached our solution, but first I'd just like to share a brief video for our teammates who are not able to make it today.
Mi nombre es Beverly Castillo Herrera, soy docente de la Facultad Regional Multidisciplinaria de Estelí, UNAM Managua FAREN Estelí, y soy mentora del equipo de SOMOS por parte de Nicaragua.
I am Beverly Castillo Herrera, and I work for UNAM FAREN Estelí, and I'm the consultant of this team.
Yo soy Santiago Ramírez y soy estudiante del 5º año de Ingeniería Ambiental de FAREN Estelí.
My name is Santiago, and I am a senior student in the Environmental Sciences.
Mi nombre es Octavio José Sanabria, soy estudiante de Ingeniería de Energías Renovables de la Facultad Multidisciplinaria de FAREN Estelí.
My name is Octavio, and I study renewable energy at FAREN Estelí.
Nicaragua tiene una gran problemática ambiental y es la escasez y el mal uso del agua.
Nicaragua has a big environmental problem, which is the shortage and lack of good water.
El mayor proceso de esta problemática se basa en la caficultura.
The problem with this has to do with the coffee industry.
Y es por ello que nosotros decidimos abordar este tema.
And that's why we have decided to tackle this problem.
Es muy importante dar solución a este problema para nuestro país,
It is very important for us to solve this problem for our country,
ya que la contaminación del agua y el desperdicio del agua
because water pollution and water wasting
es algo que afecta mucho, ya sea en la contaminación como en la economía.
because this has a big impact on the economy and pollution in general.
So a year ago today, my teammate Taylor and I were on a study abroad trip in Nicaragua where we met our two teammates just on the screen here. We made an agreement with them that we wanted to do this project based on the issues that they understood to be true and to develop solutions with local agency and existing technology. We knew this would require intense communication back and forth, and we really needed a teammate that could help us translate from Spanish to English. We found Enrique, who provided to be the perfect teammate, for he had been on the trip a year before us, understood the issues that Nicaragua was facing with the drought, and had empathy for the farmers of Miraflor. Fortunately, between the two universities, we've been able to work with some tremendous mentors and collaborators along the way who have helped us connect the dots within our project. We decided to focus on Miraflor specifically, for this region produces high-quality shade-grown coffee, one of the country's leading exports. But right now, the farmers in this region are troubled by the severe drought that they face. So essentially, we looked at how we could filter water on a small scale. While this is certainly an issue, we were urged to think bigger. So we looked at local industry and found that there was a lack of waste management within the coffee production process. We found a lot of interesting opportunities along the way and scaled up again to propose a farming cooperative that would manage all of the resources in one area and provide a source of transportation from the farm to the marketplace. We then addressed some of the financial realities with this cooperative and scaled back a little bit, looking at the cooperative in greater detail. So throughout the course of this project, we've studied the coffee production process, all the way from picking the cherry on the farm after it's been harvested to where it would go eventually to be roasted and sold to the consumer. Fortunately, we used a local company, Ferris Coffee and Nut, as a case study for understanding the journey of the coffee bean once it's been exported, but we wanted to focus on the process prior to export, for our teammates observed a problem within this process. Within Miraflor, the wet method is what they refer to as the process of how they produce coffee. This uses large amounts of water only once, but in return, it produces a much higher quality coffee bean. Fortunately for the farmers, they have a natural source of water. Unfortunately, however, with the wet process, the water is contaminated, and due to a lack of infrastructure to manage this water waste, it runs off into nearby drinking supplies. And we actually found traces of E. coli in this water, so we felt this was an important issue to address. Our teammates did some field research in understanding the contamination process in greater detail. Not only was there tremendous amounts of wastewater, there was also large amounts of organic material being underutilized. These were the problems that we identified. The farmer, however, one of our strategic partners, whose name is Francisco, operates multiple farms in this region and identified to us that the main problem the farmers face is getting their beans to the marketplace, given the tremendously rough terrain in this area. So now we have this systems level problem. There's underutilization of resources, tremendous waste, and the farmers essentially have a hard time even selling their product. So this is what essentially became our design challenge. So currently, to recap that, there are two problems: lack of transportation, and once the bean goes through the process, it creates acidic water, which essentially is leaked into nearby drinking supplies. And this process only produces one source of revenue. SOMOS proposes a new cooperative model. Utilizing a local organization of dirt bikers referred to as the Coyote Boys, we would transport the entire coffee cherry from the farm to a SOMOS cooperative processing plant that is further down the mountain, which would allow all of the materials to be better managed and allow for maximization of these materials to add revenue or to use them as food in other areas. So essentially we found out that the organic materials that were being underutilized can be turned into cascara tea. The acidic water can be used as an energy source, as well as possibly can be mixed and formed into bioplastic. And after the coffee bean is exported, we found that there was still some beans that did not hold a high enough value to be sold, and these could be used as food for a biodiesel project at the National University, strengthening our relationship with them moving forward. We decided to focus on processing the whole coffee cherry in one area because there's valuable resources that are sort of time sensitive. The pulp, which is the outer layer of the cherry, needs to be dried pretty soon after it's been separated from the bean in order to make the tea. The parchment also can be utilized as compost in this matter. So to break down this process, the whole coffee cherry goes into a depulper machine, which separates the bean from the pulp. The excess from this can be used as compost. The pulp then goes into a commercial dehydrator, which after it has been dehydrated can be packaged, shipped, and sold as tea. The beans go into the fermentation tank, and this is where we get the acidic water. So continue on the journey of the bean. They go to be sun-dried, removal of the parchment, and they are shipped, packed, and sold as well. But the acidic water is really the main issue within this process. We figured out that combining starch and glycerin, which we found some waste streams from a starch processing plant, and a glycerin byproduct from the biodiesel program, that we could actually make starch plastics, which we think holds interesting opportunities moving forward as possible packaging products. But because this issue requires immediate action, we felt that the acidic water needs to be stored and managed properly. We found a local solution using anaerobic digestion, which would store and manage the water and also produce a source of methane, which we feel could possibly power the processing plant or be used as fuel for the dirt bikes. So we wanted to understand the prices of the market rates of coffee currently in comparison to cascara. We figured out that coffee currently sells for about 98 cents per ounce. In relation to that, cascara sells for about $1.51 per ounce, and actually at a lower volume. And we spoke to a person that works at Ferris Coffee, who assured us that there is little competition in the marketplace of cascara, and And it's actually a very viable solution for coffee farmers in Central America to add another source of profit. And we believe that if every byproduct of the coffee production process is either safely reusable or sold, we can create an additional revenue stream for our farmers to help sustain their operations. So to recap, by utilizing local agency with the Coyote Boys and delivering the whole coffee cherry to a processing plant closer to the city where the materials can be properly managed, we believe that we can gain revenue, minimize waste, and essentially keep the contaminated water out of the drinking supply. Thank you. Whoops.
Nice job.
Thank you.
So this drought is no joke in Nicaragua,
No joke,
right?
no.
Yeah, it's been going on since, what, 2014?
I believe, yes, about 5 years.
And you've been there?
Yep.
And what are some of the impact that you saw while you were visiting?
A lot of the farms were actually not operating, or if they were, they were currently shifting a lot of their processes to utilize the resources in more valuable ways and essentially turn all of their farms into organic, sustainable farming operations, just so that they can maximize everything that they have.
Wow, I heard the banana crop was really devastated.
It was, yes.
Yeah, mostly.
But we actually found some promise. A lot of other agricultural industries are suffering, and the coffee industry is still suffering, but because they produce it in shade-grown areas, it requires somewhat less water and less large amounts of land to produce the coffees.
Interesting. Now, KCAD has had a relationship with Nicaragua for some time. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think for the last 4 or 5 years, Kendall students have gone down with a team of Grand Valley State students to do a week-long design and innovation workshop with faculty and students from the National University. So we sort of act as mentors and facilitators in the workshop, and yeah, it's really fun.
It must have been quite an experience.
It was wonderful.
Yeah. So it's nice to have a home, representation from KCAD here in the competition.
I'm very
It's kind of
proud
cool.
to
You're very proud.
represent, yeah.
I met your dad.
Oh, cool.
He's here.
Got some family here.
He's a good guy. Actually, he and I, we know each other kind of, so
Oh,
that's it.
interesting.
It was good to
I'll
meet
have
him
to
face
hear that
to
one
face.
later.
Right. So, I think they look like they're almost ready. Nope, they're still working. They need another minute or so.
That's okay.
So how many students from KCAD went down to Nicaragua?
Last year there was 3, and there's typically between 3 and 5.
How many years have you been studying here?
I just graduated, and I did 3 years here.
You did 3 years here. It was a good experience?
It was a great experience.
You better say that the president's in the...
It was a great experience.
Great. Yes. Wonderful. I think they're ready. Good luck.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to say I thought your presentation was excellent. I really liked your graphs. We were just talking about that. But I'm really interested about this Cascara tea, that it's actually worth more than the coffee beans.
Yeah, so it requires to be produced on an organic farm, which there are less of those. Fortunately, we were working with organic farms, so we had that sort of advantage. But it also requires a bit of a different process. So it's sort of a tricky cultural dynamic where you are maybe sort of trying to incentivize a farmer to rethink what they're growing and how they're using their crops. And right now there isn't a lot of people doing it, so we just found a lack of competition within the market there. So.
Cool. I'll go next. Oh, you have your finger up. Right?
Okay, we just and follow on to that. How do you know that there's a demand for the Cascara tea?
We were told that by the subject matter expert that we have working at Ferris, who has some connections in Central America and sees the market essentially increasing in the last 3 years and the demand increasing. We found local companies here that sell it, as well as, hate to say it, bigger companies like Starbucks are also starting to sell it. So we see the demand increasing.
Cool. I have a question about the transportation network and the
Sure.
Coyote Boys, and I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more on how that would work, how much of the whole fruit can be transported on a dirt bike. Will they need special modifications? How many trips will they need to be made, and
Sure.
compensation for
Right.
them?
We definitely have understood that this would be a barrier moving forward. But it is essentially the main way that they transport goods in and out of Miraflor right now. So the dirt bikes are sort of rigged with like satchels on the back that can actually take a decent amount of goods to and from the city of Esteli, which is maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours away. And really the main reason we felt that this was a viable solution to at least start the process is this is a natural reserve. So not only paving roads and putting in the infrastructure would just be sort of environmentally wrong, it would cost a tremendous amount of money that Nicaragua just doesn't have to invest. So yes, we see that having dirt bikes as our main transportation could be an issue, but it is really the main transportation there. And we think that it sort of provides a sense of inspiration and motivation within the community and sort of sustains other industries, micro-industries there. So, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered whether with the new setup, you're in some way disempowering the farmers, because you're removing some of the processing stage from them.
Right.
How would you ensure that they still have an equal or higher standard of living under the SOMOS system?
Mm-hmm. So we kind of came at it from the cooperative model where SOMOS isn't really a separate entity. This is really a group of farmers that are working together. So after it's been processed, and it's not in the city, it's not dramatically further away, it's just closer to an area where they can have the infrastructure shipped there to manage the waste. But essentially, to answer your question, I think the important part is that yeah, I see where you're coming from with that. I think I'll have to get back to you on that one.
This seems like it's going to be fairly capital intensive, especially the startup costs to build this facility,
Sure.
operating costs. And as a cooperative, I'm assuming the farmers don't have the funds to invest and accumulate themselves. Where do you see the investment money coming from this?
We see it coming from some microlending as well as continuing to do competitions like this, but also we have this really strong relationship with the National University there, who essentially fund some of these pilot programs to get off the ground and get started. So we think that by leveraging our relationship with them, we could really maximize our potential of how we might get money. We've also talked about doing some carbon offset programs as well.
I just want to say I appreciate your presentation. It was succinct, clear, and I got it all the way through. There was one point where I know that you guys have adjusted your position around bioplastics. Yes. As we went through the rounds of feedback, because that can be fraught with a lot of challenges and cost a lot of money. Right. And I was wondering, why did you pursue that path? Because you could just treat acidic water, presumably, without having to come up with a fancy plastic. And I know maybe you're thinking revenue stream, but are there other opportunities instead?
Yeah, so what he's referring to, last phase we had proposed to use the bioplastic as a revenue stream, but instead focused on possibly experimenting in making starch plastic packaging, which we've actually seen that the tea and coffee, when it's shipped, comes in these big plastic bags that is essentially made of starch plastic. So we felt that it could essentially be a food for that. But I think the main reason why we didn't want to just treat the water is we've seen a lot of foreign technology be implemented there in that area to treat the water, and within a year to even 6 months it breaks, and no one has been really informed about how to maintain it. So we felt that this could maybe be a way to create sort of a new product or a new resource that they could use within their operation.
What's happening with the center? Is it parchment?
Yeah, the parchment.
What's happening with that right now? And can that be a revenue stream potentially?
So we were planning, because they were using all of the organic materials as compost, we felt that just by taking all of it and trying to push it as some sort of revenue would be entirely unfair for the farmers. So by keeping a pretty decent bulk of those organic materials as compost, because we haven't identified a way that they could be a sellable product. We still deliver them compost, and then part of it can be used as revenue. So.
Thank you.
Does that mean the compost makes its way back up the mountain?
Yes, so the dirt bikers deliver the cherry, and after the process, they bring back the compost. Colin, could you actually possibly repeat the question that you asked?
Sure. It was whether the coffee farmers are in some way disempowered by the change in the,
Right.
in the production process.
Right. So yeah, this was something that we were a little bit worried about, because essentially taking the whole cherry and processing it elsewhere does somewhat eliminate the process that they were doing on their farm. But we found that a lot of these small farmers were sharing production facilities, and these facilities weren't necessarily their own. And a lot of them knew that there was a better way to manage the waste, that the water is contaminated, but there's simply nothing that they knew that they could do with it. And so the fact that it was running off stream, we sort of had a dialogue about, well, no, we can't take the production and centralize it elsewhere. That is sort of the improper way to do this. But we felt that it was a better solution than having essentially the lack of resources to keep the water out of the contaminated drinking supply. So, and then we also feel that by using this cooperative model, then transporting the compost back and sort of keeping the relationship back and forth, we think would incentivize the farmers to want to not only have an additional resource of revenue, but we think that it would sort of maximize their operations.
I was going to follow on the question about bioplastics. In your diagram, it showed a biodigester process in there somewhere, and I wasn't sure if that was part of the bioplastics production or a separate alternative.
That was the separate alternative. That was the immediate solution, I guess, for the acidic water.
So how does that work?
So, from my understanding, the water is essentially stored in this vessel, which we saw on a decent amount of farms there. It's mostly submerged underground, and by introducing natural bacteria, can actually neutralize the water so that it's eventually able to be reintroduced to the environment. And within that, as it's neutralized, it creates a source of methane, which, yeah.
Cool. I hadn't heard of treating water in that way. I usually heard of biodigesters, digesting food waste or something organic.
In full transparency, it was sort of not a last minute, but a late addition to the project, and we found some research that it's actually a way to filter the coffee wastewater.
That's really
so
interesting.
it's like we should do that.
Cool.
You've been, obviously this project started by a visit down there.
Yes.
Do you have any prototypes in development, or are you testing any pieces of this process?
A couple weeks ago, we tested that we could actually make a plastic. So we feel confident that through proper balances, we could actually produce that. Fortunately enough, these farms are operating right now. So we have a network, we have strong relationships there, and I think we really want to continue to go back and work with these people. And they're going to continue whether we want to or not. So.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Nice.